But he's here to give us a little insight into that Vietnam era, which this is our 50th year since that war ended. Most people don't know and don't care. Well, some of us do. So, Captain Andy Fosina.
Yeah.
The good-looking one.
Thank you for that eloquent introduction.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I learned a long time ago, nothing from my brother is free. And when I told him we were going to come up, my wife and I are coming up this weekend because we have a son that lives down in Lawrenceville and a couple of birthdays, so we wanted to come and celebrate those. We said we'd like to stop up today and visit with my brother and my sister-in-law Nancy. Oh yeah, come on, great, we'll spend the day. And then the next phone call was, hey, listen, I'd like to be our speaker for the lunch at the Air Force Association. So okay, so I thought I was going to talk about my Navy career, which was 26 years, not 26 and a half, to be honest. And he said, yeah, talk about your experiences in the Navy. These guys don't know much about the inner workings of the Navy. So I said, well, okay, I can do that. How many days do I have to talk? He said, well, most people talk for about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, then I saw the flyer come out and it says he's going to talk about his Vietnam time. Well, that certainly narrowed it down for him a little bit. I did 2 tours. I went in country for almost 13 months, and I'll talk about that. And I'll also talk about the second time I went over on a destroyer, and I was on the gun line for about 3 months, a little over 3 months, and then I rotated back to the States for my next tour of duty. Excuse me. So I want to thank my brother for the invitation. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to come and do this. I haven't done this in many, many years, so I did a lot of research on my own record to see what might be of interest to you, and it gave me a chance to bring back a lot of memories and a lot of people that I served with, and I'm glad to be here to do this. This is a micro view of what the Navy did in Vietnam. There was a lot more Navy than I was involved in, but this is my little piece of the Navy. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit. I was a young officer with 2 years of service at the time I got my orders to Vietnam. By that time I had married, had 1 son, and I was just finishing a tour on board a World War II destroyer, USS Rich, out of Norfolk, Virginia. Did 2 years on that, almost 2 years, and then got my orders to Vietnam. So I started through all the preparatory schools, and I went through SEER training, weapons training, land navigation, et cetera, et cetera. The only school I didn't go to was the language school, which a lot of guys who were going to be advisors went to the language school. But since I was needed in such a hurry to get there, I did not get to go to the language school. When I did arrive, well, let me talk in general terms about the Navy first, just to set the stage for you. In general, the Navy performed a wide range of missions in Vietnam. It was in the air. They were a key partner with the Air Force during Rolling Thunder and Linebacker, which Bill just talked about, and also against other forces in Cambodia and Laos, which we don't talk about very often. On the coast, it operated very effective blockade operations in the southern part of Vietnam to prevent resupply of the Viet Cong through the waterways. Those were called market time operations. On the rivers, we had PBRs, Patrol Boats River, which was a large number of people, but it was mostly down in the southern part of the country. The country was divided by the Allies into 4 core areas. I Corps being up north in the area of the DMZ, primarily the responsibility of the Marine Corps, 4 Corps being down in the Saigon area in the Delta. And that was where the Army was, and of course the Army spread through the other 2 Corps areas up into the Central Highlands in Corps 2 and 3. The Navy ran the largest medical facility in Vietnam. It's a medical evacuation facility in Da Nang. That facility was manned by 800 officers and enlisted personnel, and primarily serviced the whole I Corps and 2 Corps area of operations. So I told you about that. So when I got my orders, as I told you, I was told that I had to get over there in a hurry. They needed me. They were standing up a port in the little village of Tan Me at the mouth of the Perfume River up in I Corps, about halfway between the DMZ and Da Nang. And that port was going to be the primary supply port for the city, the historical city of Hue, which was a central point for the Marine Corps just north of Da Nang. So when I got there, I left Conus. I went through Norton Air Force Base in California, which some of you may remember, but I believe that was decommissioned in '96. When I arrived in Da Nang, I was informed that Tan Me wasn't built yet. It was about a year behind schedule. So there was no need for me to go to Tan Me. I said, great. Rushed me over here, brand new kid left behind at home, and here I am, what am I going to do? Well, they put me in the Harbor Security Division of the Naval Support Activity in Da Nang. We had the responsibility of all of the harbor of Da Nang, all the commercial shipping that came in and out, and which was because Da Nang was the primary resupply port for all of I Corps. All the ammunition, all the logistics, all the supplies came through the port of Da Nang. Tan Me was eventually built about a year later, and it served the city of Hue. I joined Bob Foley. Lieutenant Bob Foley was the officer in charge of the Harbor Security Group in Da Nang. Joined his group, 3 officers and about 150 enlisted people. We had a harbor entrance control post up on the top of Monkey Mountain, which was at the mouth of the Da Nang Bay, and we had a harbor patrol area down in the harbor area itself, which consisted of a couple of barges that we had built. They had started, and I was there for the finish of a couple of buildings on, not necessarily for berthing, although when events got hot, we kept people in the berthing areas in there, but primarily as our maintenance facility for the boats. So we had 45-foot wooden hulled patrol boats, a little bit bigger than what you were telling me about before. We had 8 of those. They had 50 caliber machine guns up above the cockpit, and then we also mounted 81 millimeter mortars on the bow. Those patrolled the harbor on a regular basis. We had 36-foot steel hulled patrol boats, which had 30 caliber machine guns on them. And then we had a gathering of 18-foot Boston whalers that we used for rapid response to get us around the harbor in a hurry. They were not armed, but the people on them obviously carried various weapons and grenades. At the top of Monkey Mountain, at the harbor entrance control post, it had been built on top of what was a residence there. Beautiful place, nice building. And then the Navy came in and the Seabees came in and they built this beautiful veranda and open view area up on top, where we had a radar site and communications, obviously with all the craft in the harbor. We could talk to the ships, we could talk to the boats. We also had an 81 millimeter mortar there, which could reach almost across the harbor. It was primarily used for illumination rounds. That was manned 24 hours a day by regular watchstanders. So that's why it took so many people. We had about 150 people there. We also provided people and craft to a place called Quaviet, which was the resupply point for Dong Ha. Dong Ha was the Marine Corps base just south of the DMZ and was the Marine Central Command area for all the forces that patrolled along the DMZ and the very northern tip of I Corps. So the Quaviet River was our responsibility. We provided boats and sailors for that area. And then to the south, which was the southernmost logistics point in I Corps, was a port called Chulai, and we had craft and men down there that we provided. I'd been there about 3 months. I arrived in July, and I'd been there about 3 months, and the guy that I was working for broke his leg. So he got shipped back to the States, medevacked out, and I wound up being put in charge of the Harbor Patrol unit down in the Cove area. So I was responsible for funneling people to the outlying areas, making sure the patrol schedules were kept and that sort of stuff. And then I took my turn in the watch rotation up at the Harbor Entrance Control Post. That only lasted about 2 months, and then my boss, Lieutenant Bob Foley, got killed in a boating accident. He was the first casualty that I suffered, if you will, in Vietnam. He was driving down the river in Da Nang. The boat steering cable broke, and the boat threw him out of the boat and came around and killed him. So I wound up with the whole harbor security job for about 4 months, I guess it was, 4 or 5 months before they brought a lieutenant commander in to take my place. The TET Offensive started about 6 weeks later, the end of January. The 30th of January 1968 is when TET Offensive started. It's when the North Vietnamese rolled across the DMZ and came down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and came across from the western side of the country. And things certainly picked up for us in Da Nang. We had a number of sapper unit attempts on ships in the harbor. Fortunately, through the cunning and skill of the boat drivers and the sailors that we had down in there, we had no incidents. We managed to, now they're called IEDs, we call them bombs. But we managed to dismantle and pull away the ones that were on the ships that had gotten through, and we had suffered no casualties to any of the ships. I guess the highest part of the TET Offensive lasted about 3 weeks, so we stayed on high alert for that period of time. Because all ammunition for I Corps flowed through Da Nang. So Da Nang was a prime target, and the pace of ammunition flowing through had to increase because the U.S. forces needed so much more. Following the TET Offensive, things kind of got back to normal, if you will, in the latter part of February, early March. And one of the duties that we had there, which may be of interest to you folks, we called it Det 10. And I think that was just the name of the detachment that was there. I never got the full name of the unit. But they used to fly unmanned drone aircraft over I Corps, throughout I Corps on reconnaissance. They probably did this in the other corps too. But we were involved in assisting in their recovery of the aircraft. They weren't drones like we have today. You could just fly around and land them wherever you wanted them. These things came back. They were launched by Air Force aircraft, flown over I Corps, taking pictures, which could not be sent back. They had film on them. And then these drones were flown over the bay in Da Nang. Their engines were shut down, and a parachute was put out, and they parachuted down. And on their way down, an Air Force helicopter would snag it, take it over to Da Nang Air Base, and unload the film and for the processing. So our job in support was to make sure that area was clear, set aside a couple anchorage areas for them, and then be there in case the thing went in the water until the Air Force could come out and pick it up and take it back. So that was my support of the Air Force for that period of time. We did one other thing there that I think you might find interesting. We did what Bob Foley had started when he got there. He called it a flat. Now there must have been about 150 sampans in Da Nang, people that lived on the water, up and down the river, along the coastline, and they would take their sampans every day and go out and go fishing. That's how they made their livelihood. Well, at night they would come back, or late afternoon. So about once a week, on a random day, Bob would scramble all of our craft, and we would set up a barrier across the harbor, and everybody had to be searched coming back in. So we searched every one of those samples. I mean, I tell you, I take down into some stuff. I can never remember finding any ammunition, contraband coming back in, but I'll never forget the smell of it. In July of '68, I returned to Conus via Travis Air Force Base. And then 4 years later, I was the operations officer on board USS Joseph Hewes, a brand new frigate, number 1078. We had commissioned her in Newport, Rhode Island in the previous year, and she was the first of a class. And when the Navy commissions a new class of ships, it spends a lot of time testing those ships to see about what follow-on changes need to be made to the follow-on ships. So we were the first of a class, and we spent a lot of time running ranges and sound trials and all kinds of stuff. But in the spring of '72, we were preparing for our first deployment with Destroyer Squadron 2, and we were supposed to go to the Mediterranean. Well, that's the year, if you remember your history, back when the Easter Offensive started, the second major offensive of the Vietnam War. And the Navy was tasked to scramble more efforts out there to help support the operations. That's when Linebacker came into existence. And so our deployment, the whole squadron, was turned from going to the Mediterranean to going to Vietnam. It took us about 30 days to get out there. It's a long trip, Pacific Ocean. Big ocean. We spent the first 3 weeks providing lifeguard support, plane guard, we used to call it plane guard, for the aircraft carrier, USS America. We'd trail in her wake when she was getting ready to do flight operations, and our job was to be a beacon for the planes coming back, and also to be in position in case one of them didn't grab that hook or grab that wire and wound up in the drink to put him. So we kept a lifeboat station manned and ready to go to pick up the pilots in case one of those went in the water. We did that for 3 weeks, and then our air search radar, I don't know, we lost a part, something broke, and we got taken off and was replaced. So they sent us to the gun line. So we went back to where I had been before, just south of the DMC, part of the surface part of Linebacker, and provided gunfire support to the First Air Cavalry? Yes, First Air Cavalry. You mentioned the First Cavalry before. By that time, the Marines had left Vietnam for the most part, and we had gone from that high number that Phil mentioned before down to about 7,000 combat troops, 6,000 to 7,000 combat troops in the spring of 1972. So when the TET Offensive started, it was up to the ARVN primarily, with our guys in support, to turn it back. Well, that wasn't working too well, and the gun line was a pretty active place to be to provide fire support for the troops ashore. I guess the biggest thing besides the rotation, we were on a 3-day rotation. We'd do 12 hours on the gun line, ready for call for fire. Then you detach from there and you go out to the replenishment line about 20 miles off the coast, and you'd either get ammunition, fuel, or supplies. And you go back to the gun line for another day of firing, and then you'd go out to get the other stuff that you didn't get the night before, and then you'd go back to the gun line for 36 hours. And it was this continuous rotation until they had somebody to start the relieving process, or until your gun bore just wore out from firing so many rounds. We had a single 5-inch 54 gun, and we used it pretty extensively out there. But we were fortunate. I think we only did that for about a month and a half, and then we went to the Philippines for a break, and my orders had come in, and I rotated off and came back to the States. So I was only out there the second time for about 2.5, 3 months. So those are the things that I did in Vietnam, the things that the Navy did that you may not hear about. The business of logistics support, a lifeline of, I'll expand a little bit here for just a few minutes. But I also deployed on Desert Shield. I didn't stay there because, again, I had orders for rotation in January of 1991, and I came back. But I was the chief of staff for the amphibious task force that was out there. And, it's absolutely unbelievable, the logistic support that was necessary to keep us out there. We took that task force out in August. We sailed in August of 1990. And I came back in January, and we spent 6 of 7 days a week supplying the ships. We had something like 12,000 Marines embarked. We had 13 ships, and the amount of food, the amount of ammunition used for training, the amount of other logistic supplies was just unbelievable. So I think that's one of the lessons learned that obviously the Russians didn't learn, because they certainly screwed it up in Ukraine. But I think we've learned our lesson in what we need in that respect. And thank you again for letting me come and talk to you about this. I hope it's of interest. Hope you enjoyed it. If I can answer any questions, I'll be happy to. Thank you all for your service, too. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Usually we try and do some photos at this one.
We can hear you.
You can hear me.
Your voices sound the same, you know that?
Do they?
I understand. Nice talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, certain phrases, yeah.
So, thank you. That pretty much wraps up the meeting. It was I hope, again, this is the 50th anniversary of the peace accord of Vietnam. And most people don't know what we did.
Thank you.
You may have seen a movie or two, mostly Army. And the Army, listen, I would not have wanted to be in the Army in that jungle. I tell Phil that all the time.
Thank God for Snoopy.
That's
I
right.
wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Snoopy.
Gunship. Snoopy was a gunship that we put up.
Wow.
And it would fly over bases or encampments all night long, holding back the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese.
Was that an A-10?
No, C-130 gunship. And it had it had a cannon in it, a big cannon besides Gatling guns.
Oh, Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yeah, same thing, multiple names, Snoopy, Puff the Magic Dragon. Put them up every night, circled. I met a Marine back when I met Harriet, giving a presentation, and he came up and he said, "Thank God for the Air Force. Thank God for Snoopy, Puff the Magic, whatever you want to call it, C-130." He said, "It would get dark and we'd be scared, something or other. And Snoopy would show up, light up the sky, and protect us all night long. He said, I can't thank you enough for what you guys did." And, there's a lot to keeping those planes in the air. They don't fly themselves, you got the flight crews. We have, the Air Force has one Medal of Honor who was flying in one of those when a flare went off, and he was able to get it out of the plane, otherwise it would have blown the plane up. He was severely burned and what have you. He was given the Medal of Honor for that. He's deceased now, he was from Connecticut. And, you know, they were dangerous. It was, I would think it's pretty boring work, flying a plane in a circle for 10 or 12 hours, you know? Go back, refuel while another plane substitutes for you.
What's Snoopy stand for?
It didn't stand for anything in particular. It's just, they just called it.
What was it?
They called it Puff the Magic Dragon also,
Light up the sky?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was, is an airplane flew around protecting you, you said?
Yeah, protecting the ground troops at night.
So it would shoot at enemies?
Around there, yes. They'd call in their position, and if there was any enemy activity, we'd put up a gunship and then they would just saturate the area
Wow.
with Gatling guns, mostly that shot like 3,000 rounds a minute. So, yeah. So it was
A lot of bullets in the ground.
a big, you know, combined effort. So I got up here to say thank you. I don't know how I got off, but you know, everybody had a job to do, and some were dirty and harder than others. And, but we all thank you for coming. The intent was, we know a lot about World War II, we know a little bit about Korea, we almost know nothing about Vietnam, and I think that's where I was going. The 50th anniversary of the Peace Accord. And, I believe our state meeting during the summer is gonna be at the Vietnam Memorial in New Jersey, which is down off the Parkway. And there'll be more information coming out about that.
Traveling wall? Traveling
Any-
wall?
any
That's the
questions?
that's the
What?
traveling wall?
No, this is, we have a Vietnam Memorial in New Jersey.
By the Garden State Arts
Garden
Center.
State Arts
Yes,
Center.
sir. Yes,
Garden
sir.
State Arts Center.
If you've never stopped in there, you should. It's
I've been
an
there.
impressive.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I've been there also.
It's nice,
A couple of
yes.
times I've stopped. You got something stuck. In that, but anyway, so, yeah. So I believe in August, we're gonna have a meeting down there. And, but it's, this year, let's, you know, try and remember the guys and women that died in Vietnam and served in Vietnam and still don't get much recognition. Those of us that served, remember.